Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/new music industry. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
You're listening to the New Music Industry with David Andrew Weeb.
Today I'm chatting with award-winning Canadian singer, songwriter, and producer Troy Kokol. How are you today, Troy?
Doing good. Doing very good, David.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me. And I was trying to learn a little bit about you for this conversation, but you're a bit of a mystery online. So I would love for you to take a moment to share about your background, who you are, and what you're up to.
Yeah, so I started late in the business. I didn't pay my dues like everybody else. I, had a job and was just going about my life. And we had a fortunate break with songwriting. And it's a super long story, but ultimately what ended up happening was a song that we wrote was cut by a Canadian artist with a brand new label, brand new artist, and it blew up. And it did as good as a song could have, in that type of situation. And so all of a sudden we were thrust, from, doing a day job thing to okay, I guess we're songwriting now. And so that was about 10 years ago and a little over 10 years ago. And so from there, we just have evolved. It's evolved into songwriting. I started producing. And then, of course, the more you start singing, the more you start doing your own stuff. So right now, the what we do business wise is pretty broad, so I'm an independent artist as well. I mix and master and produce and record all my stuff myself. But I also produce, mix and master for other artists. And most of the stuff that we do and most of the things that we have had success with are in the, country pop genre. But I do work in folk as well with folk artists but it all feels new, even though it's been 10 years. So because like I say, I never suffered, sleeping in the van down by the river or nothing. I kind of, I got the best of both worlds. So, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. And we make our home here in Calgary, and we decided to do that a long time ago. We could have moved south and that was an option, but we decided that Calgary was going to be the place where we were going to set our roots and just do what we could from our home. And so we've been really glad to do that.
That's awesome. It strikes me that there are a lot of opportunities in songwriting just from having talked to a few other people out there who were doing the same thing. So correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of what I'm seeing is it actually offers quite a few different revenue streams, right? Because you could be writing songs for others and collecting royalties on that, but you could also be making your own music. And like you said, you're producing other people's music too. So creating more opportunities for yourself really allows you to draw from a bit of a bigger pool, right?
That's right. And I think the other part of it is that when we got in the business, it was a different world. And now, especially because of the digital era, a lot of people, I feel, think the digital era has crushed the music business. And it certainly has for the large companies. But I feel like the smaller independent artists, the independent labels, and, even someone like myself, because we can now, I can do all of the things I need to do to make a record sound, half decently pro and put it out. And so, I think as a songwriter, yeah, you're absolutely right, David. You can, if you can write your own music and you can release that music, there are 5 major revenue streams you can draw on as a songwriter. And so you can take advantage of that because you own the master, because you paid for the recording, because you are the singer, because you are the songwriter. There's a whole bunch of, you're collecting pennies from all over the place, but there's the more exposure. And of course, the better the songs are. I always tell artists it's so important to focus on the quality of your songs. And until that's ready, it's almost not really worth it to go, busting down doors and making CDs quite yet. Performing, absolutely, but It's on the songwriting side of it. I think, you just need to give yourself the opportunity to grow and to grow into something, that other people can get into.
So how
Yeah.
do you get into writing songs for others? Is that a matter of like networking and getting to know people? Is it a matter of using certain tools online? Is it a combination thereof?
Yeah, it's definitely a combination, but I would say most importantly for all of it is just is honing your craft and being good, and so and being okay with not being good for a while and having that patience and persistence. I can honestly say, and I tell people this all the time, the opportunities that have put money in my pocket have been almost exclusively when my phone rings. It's not
Mm.
when I'm trying to get a publishing deal or I'm trying to get a co-write with some big artist or I'm trying to, whatever it is, fulfill some ego thing that I've got, and we're artists and we all have that, sort of it's really hard to suppress that want to just like, well, I should get a record deal or I should do this or I should songwrite for this person or that person. But what I've found is that, every time I've tried to do that and take control of it, it's always failed. But when I've had success is when I've just decided, you know what, I'm going to do what I have control over and just try to write better songs. And lo and behold, the more I did that and the more I focused on my own skills, you know what? The phone rings because you're actually, and I think part of it is that you're proving yourself.
Mm.
You're able to prove to other people, and you're not coming at it with with an attitude of desperation. You're coming at it. People are coming to you because it's like, wow, did you hear that song that David just sang? That's amazing. I got to go talk to that guy.
Mm.
Because you spent the time to work on it. So all of my opportunities have come that way. So I never called, like I write children's songs for a international educational company that's headquartered in Japan. I didn't call them, and I didn't get that gig because I thought that's what I should do. I always wanted to write children's songs, but the funny thing is it was through people that I knew, and I feel like part of that work had to do with me just focusing on the things I had control over, which was writing songs, playing out, releasing songs, and definitely meeting people. Networking is so important. So
Yeah, I love that because there aren't too many people that are taking that sort of approach or attitude to things. Like just working on your craft allows you to get better gigs, right? And I have something similar going on in the sense that like I've booked so few of my own gigs probably in the last 5 to 10 years. They get booked because of band leaders, because of acquaintances or friends or people I know or other musicians, to where when I do go and try to book my own gigs, it often fails and I don't get the gig. So
yeah, and I always say when your phone rings, that's the opportunity you're ready for. I call it a few people have, my friends are sick of hearing this, but I call it the pie shop. You have this amazing recipe, and because your grandma gave it to you, and you can make these amazing, pies, and you take this recipe and you go out in the street and you try to get people to buy this, recipe from you, and you're like, and they're like, man, like, are you crazy? Like, go away. Like, I don't want your stupid recipe. But instead, if you take control over what you're able to do, and maybe you rent a little corner place and you get a little oven and you start baking stuff, and what happens? The smell goes out to the street. People are like, oh my God, what is that? And you focus on it. And maybe it starts small, but then you start to you're always improving your apple pie, and the more that you improve it, after a while, people start talking about it. It's like, oh my God, have you ever been to that place? And the pies are unbelievable. And so after a while,
mm,
the work that you're trying to, the things you're trying to make happen, just happen anyways. I think we as artists focus a lot, especially in the beginning, we focus a lot on outcomes, but which to me, outcomes are like, getting an award, getting a gig, getting an agent, getting a manager. And to me, what I have found in my experience with the people that I know that have been signed with major labels, and even the little bit of success that we've had, I feel like that all of those things, those outcomes that people are wanting, often are just byproducts of doing what you have control over, which is gigging when you can, right? Making your songs as best as you can, and networking and doing the things you have control over, your website, your photos, and then everything else. Once the songs are there, you don't really have to do a lot. You really just need to be visible and to be active in the industry. But that's been my experience.
I love that. And you used the term "we" earlier, so I'm wondering what sort of help and support do you have, or do you have a bit of a team helping you out in making this happen?
I don't, it's funny because look, we, even from day one, so we had a fairly substantial success with this first song, and I thought, man, like everybody's going to want a chunk of this money, and I thought, well, that could be a good thing. But the funny thing is that, we've always operated independently. I've spent a lot of time, asking questions and learning about the business, and also studying for me, what was most important was studying what works and what doesn't work. And that comes not only with people with money, but also people with lots of talent, because a lot of people think just because someone's talented that they got it all figured out. But that's not always true. As a matter of fact, it's almost never true. And, I would say, for us, I rely on, watching and learning from other people to really help me, move forward. And I've done a lot of things to constantly learn how to mix, learn how to master stuff, learn how to write songs better, and part of that is just learning from my peers, and listening to new artists and hearing what new business people are doing to monetize their music and all that good stuff.
So what's interesting about that, I've been to enough workshops and certainly have read enough articles to know that there are certain like nuances to writing hits, so to speak, or writing songs that are more largely accepted and massively consumed. So what tips do you have for someone that's interested in becoming a professional songwriter?
If you want to do, and if someone tells me I want to be a professional songwriter, so my assumption is that you want your music to be consumed by a large, like the middle 60%. Because I think often people really just want to do cool stuff and they want to just write what they want to write, but they want it to be successful. And those two things don't always mix together. Sometimes what you do naturally just is like pop, and it works and everybody loves it, but not often. So I think the one thing that I would say, if you wanted to be like a professional songwriter and you want to have, the ability to make money from songwriting, I think the most important thing is to spend time, listening to great songwriters and, taking all the, like, I can honestly say I haven't read a lot of books or taken a lot of courses on songwriting, but I have for sure spent a lot of time listening to great songwriters and listening to like, what do I love about this song and why is it working for me? I would say the one piece of advice I got was from a fellow named Ralph Murphy, he used to be the VP of International Relations at ASCAP, which is the equivalent of SOCAN in the U.S.
Yeah.
And when I first met with Ralph, he told me, it's like, he basically said, don't think like a songwriter, think like your listener. Like his whole thing was, if you're trying to get radio people, like as in the radio industry who sells advertising, and you're trying to get all that they care about is that, when your song's playing, that single mom driving to work at 7:30 in the morning in her crappy car to her crappy job that she hates doesn't turn the radio off. So, a big chunk of what I think needs to happen in that is just keeping that in mind. And it doesn't mean you're writing every song for that, but it's always sort of trying to understand that you're trying to reach that middle 60%. You're not, and the truth is that sometimes in order to get to that place, you just really need to be honest, and you need to be, in a way that is, in a creative way that is accessing your most, your deepest secrets or your most vulnerable place. But I think at the end of the day, you really need to spend a bit of time listening to the radio, and I think also understanding the craft itself, and what kind of music is acceptable. Because if you don't really get that, if you don't spend time listening to radio, and if you don't spend time sort of studying the people that are having success, I think it's sort of a crapshoot, and you're guessing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And whenever I perform these days, and it definitely wasn't always this way, my friends or other artists mention, wow, your songs are always so pop. And I think it's gotten to the point where that comes like somewhat naturally to me. But I was in
Right.
pursuit of that for a long time because I knew I was writing these songs that didn't have as strong of a melody as I wanted. Because I was listening to some of my favorite artists, and really what I noticed was, wow, I really love that melody. I want to write melodies like that.
Yeah.
And when I got in pursuit of that and like was endlessly listening, and my roommates were like, "What are you listening for?" And I said, "I'm just listening to get a sense of how to write melodies like that."
Yeah. And I think spending a little time with like, I always listen to new stuff, like relatively new, news, anything that to me is different. Like when 21 Pilots came out with Stressed Out, or when Ed Sheeran came out with A-Team, and for me it was just like, wow, is that ever cool? Like, I really love the way he alliterates in this part, or the way that this person just kind of describes something, and so taking that into consideration as to like, okay, well, how can I bleed that into my own stuff? And again, I think the most important thing is doing that in a way, and even to in a commercial songwriting way. I think the trick of it all is to do all of that and to create fearlessly, and to be okay with, like, what, I'm probably going to miss 9 times out of 10, and that's okay. But I need to give myself a chance to turn the tap on, so to speak, and just let it flow out of me until it's feeling right. I like to say to people that it's sort of like turning on a shower. You turn on a shower, and first you turn it on, it's too cold, and then you turn it the other way, and then, oh my gosh, it's too hot, and then you're mucking around with the thing for quite a while till it's like, okay, like, this is just right. And then even then you might tweak it a little bit. But I think it's kind of the same thing with creativity. You got to give yourself an opportunity to just say stuff and be honest, and find that ability to say your truth. And then once you kind of get to that place where you can easily, fearlessly come out with that, then I think that's when you have something that is going to, people will relate to, and it's going to feel honest and real.
So here's a bit of controversy: being
Yeah.
prolific versus being perfectionists. What are your thoughts?
I used to cartoon professionally a long time ago when I was in college, and Charles Schulz was like, there's no such thing as and Charles Schulz was the guy who did like Snoopy and Peanuts and all that stuff. And his thing was, there's no such thing as writer's block. It's just different forms of fear, So to me, I think I always tell people, when you're creating, there's two elements in the room. There's a child and there's an adult. And the child will come out and come up with like fun ideas and be honest and cry and laugh and just be in the moment. And the adult will, sort of like say, well, what about that? Or what about this? And I think when we get quote unquote writer's block is when both of those, the child and the adult are in the room at the same time. And you're trying to come up with ideas, but at the same time, you've got an adult saying, no, that's not, that song's too long, or you can't say that, or whatever. And so I always tell people, it's like, differentiate those two things, compartmentalize your creativity, like allow your child, be joyful, and don't try to cage in what you're doing with things like what genre you're singing or what the content is. Like, forget about that. The greatest songwriters there ever were, if you listen to their work, it's vast and it's weird. And like, if you listen to Beck, or if you listen to Tom Waits or Bob Dylan, it's all over the place. And it's because those guys were experts at just creating freely. And then they probably went and let their parent or the adult in the room after, to like, this could be too long, need to change this, need to move this around. But I would say for, in terms of like being prolific versus, editing a lot, I would say that's my take on it.
I love that and really enjoyed what you said about there is no writer's block. And because in the last few years, I've done a lot of blogging, I've done a lot of ghostwriting. And this year, I'm working towards publishing 10 to 12 books. And my
Right.
second book is on its way. And I really believe that there is such thing as burnout, but there is no such thing as writer's block.
Yeah, and I think though, even for yourself, if you were writing your books, but you were constantly like, oh, is this going to be relevant? Is this going to be, you could literally, paralysis by analysis, right? And you could honestly stop yourself from creating something. And the truth is that, you write lots of stuff. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to fall short,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to maybe say things that weren't quite spelled out correctly or could have been stronger. But the fact is that just the more you do it, the more you're going to look back and be like, oh, I could have done that better. And those are all learning opportunities, right? So it's just really, sharpening your blade. And so that next time you go to battle, you're going to be more prepared for it. Right. So.
Yeah, actually, you're really in my brain right now because when I launched the Essential Guide to Music Entrepreneurship last year, I thought I was kind of taking a big risk by putting such a short book out there. It's probably like an hour and a half read at most. And the response has been tremendous. Like, I haven't had a bad review yet. It's all been 5 stars. And I'm like,
Right.
wow, well, that was worth doing. So I'm going to launch more of these handbooks or mini books. They'll be a little longer, but I'm going to try putting more of these out there. And like you said, this is a philosophy I've kind of adopted for my business in general. Let small bad things happen. I think it was originally in Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, but I thought, yeah, that's so true. I'm going to let small bad things happen because they will. There's going to be some mistakes in these books, and I'm going to miss a carriage return, or I'm going to use the wrong word. I'm going to misspell a word. It's just going to happen when you're producing this volume of work.
Yeah. And I think especially we mostly get hesitant when we think about the content and the validity of what we're doing. Like, is it any good? Will anyone care? And the fact is that I think that you have to approach it like, I don't care if anyone cares. You always hear about those great artists and songwriters. It's like, they don't really, they don't, a lot of times they don't care if anyone listens to it. And I think it's not a function of I'm a big deal and I don't care what anyone thinks. I just think it really is more of a function of like, I really want to do this. I love to do this. And so I'm going to do it. And I think generally when you're coming from a creative place that is honest and joyful, people groove with it. And they really think, you'll find an audience of some kind anyways.
I think that's the other piece is getting past the analysis paralysis. Could so easily kind of stop and evaluate how each book went and how it was received and what people thought of it, and sort of get into almost like people pleasing, right? Which can be very unhealthy. So
yeah, and you see that happen with songwriters and artists. You'll see an artist come out with this amazing, record that they did in some crappy, studio somewhere, and it was like super raw and super genuine. And then the next one, it's like, they get signed to some huge, multi-international label, and it's like, and it's nothing like it was before. And to me, when I think about that, it's like, it really is just a really, it's fear, it's fear from the label. It's fear from the artist. It's like, oh man, like we've got an audience now. And so I think staying genuine and always creating in a way that is joyful and, in the absence of fear, I think it's definitely the way to go.
I love that. Yeah, you're definitely bringing a new or slightly different perspective to the podcast than usual, and I love that too. So to change the flow of the conversation slightly, this is funny. Something I used to ask on my old podcast, so it brings me back a bit. But we're both living in Calgary, so I thought I would ask you. What are your thoughts on the Calgary music scene?
Honestly, when I first started getting into music, it seemed like there was nothing going on. And of course there was. There's a large folk scene. There was, country music had some prominence in the city. Yes. But I feel like in the last 5 years we've kind of turned a corner. We have a bunch of really great award-winning studios. We've got lots of amazing producers. We've got some, artists that are coming out of the city that are, getting signed to labels and being able to make a living doing what they're doing. And I feel like there's more infrastructure, maybe not for live playing as much as we would like, but still, I feel like we've turned a corner. Calgary is very corporate. We have lots of oil and gas here. We have lots of headquarters, and so one could tend to think that there is no art scene here. But I would, especially after going to the YYC Music Awards this year and seeing all the talent, like I was blown away. We work it professionally in the country music world, and so, but going to the award show here in Calgary, I was honestly like kind of embarrassed at how little I knew about all of the amazing artists that are in this town. So I feel like the art scene in Calgary right now is as good as it's ever been, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think I had a friend that said 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit more, Calgary is going to have its turn. Maybe it'll become like its own Seattle or its own Vancouver in some sense. And who knows? I mean, I don't think we're there yet, but like you say, as far as great talent goes, there is a lot to be found here.
Yeah, we have some of the best producers in the world, some of the best studios in the country, and we have, we've got a pretty strong group of songwriters. We've got some amazing artists. So I feel like, and some of the greatest, like the Ironwood is one of the most sought after live venues for folk and Americana artists, in North America. They come all from all over the place. So we're really lucky. And now with the National Music Center and the whole King Eddie venue being set up, I just feel like it's only going to get better. So I'm really hopeful.
So will Calgary continue to be your home for a time to come?
Yeah, we have family in Canada, of course, and so like I said, we could have moved to the U.S. a long time ago, and that was an option. But I just felt like, man, there's we have a radio system that supports Canadian content. We have grant systems from municipal, provincial, federal that can support artists, and we just decided that let's just do it here. Let's take it slower, and maybe we're not going to be rubbing shoulders with Jay-Z, but at least we're going to be here, and at least we're going to be nurturing a community here in Calgary. And so that was, I think, and then when I say we, I'm talking about my business partner, my wife, and also songwriter Joni Delorier. So we run this business together, and so we just decided that let's just do it here, and let's be okay with that, because ultimately we just wanted to nurture our own creativity and create a good community to work with, and we've been able to do that. So what more do you want, really?
I think the grant and funding piece is a big one because based on my research and experience, there isn't a whole lot in the States compared to Canada.
Oh my gosh. So every per publisher or small label or independent artist that we know, well, even artists that are signed to labels, I mean, like when they hear about what we have up here, they're like, you can get $30,000 for a record. Like, what? Like, how? Like,
yeah,
who pays for this? Like, and so, and that's, but we have those systems in place, but that's why we have artists that are, like we have the Drakes and the Celine Dion's and the Shania Twain's and a friend of ours, Tennille Towns, is a artist that was from Grand Prairie, and she just got signed to Columbia Records in Nashville, and but all of her career was honed on the generosity of the CanCon and the generosity of Factor and the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, and they helped her learn and cut her teeth, and so she wouldn't be able to have done that in the absence of that without hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so we're really lucky in that way. So that's why we decided to stay here.
Super cool. And you mentioned community a little earlier, and I know you've done quite a bit with Calgary Songsmiths over the years, so love for you to talk about that. What is it, and what have you been up to?
Yeah, the Calgary Songsmiths. It started out as a small group that was associated to the Songwriters Association of Canada, and it was like a regional sort of branch, and it was started by Nancy LaBerge, and everybody got busy, and Nancy got busy, and the group sort of dwindled down to about 3 people, and Nicole, a friend of ours, kept it going, thank goodness. And after we had a little bit of success, I was kind of griping about, man, like I really wish we had a songwriting community in Calgary, and a little voice in my head was like, well, then do something about it. So
Totally.
we went back to that group, and thankfully there was like 3 people there. And thankfully Nicole had kept it together, and we just injected some love into it. We started a Facebook group, and we started to bring speakers in and just put a little bit of energy into it. And it slowly built. And in the last couple of years, we sort of amped it up and said, hey, what if we, started bringing in, some speakers from out of town. And so we brought in some Grammy Award winning songwriters to do some workshops, and we've just done little things. And right now, the Calgary Songsmiths we just found this out a few months ago, was that we're the largest independent songwriter group in Canada, and we're like I would say all in North America, is arguable, but we're it's grown to a point where it's so much fun, and we have a really great turnout of amazing songwriters, and we've now seen some of the songwriters that we have been in the group are on a verge of getting a record deal or moving on to bigger and better things. And so it's been so awesome. Like it's my favorite day of the month. It happens on the 3rd Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. at Waves Coffee House, and you can check it out. All the details are on the Calgary Songsmiths webpage, which is really just the Facebook page. So if you Google Calgary Songsmiths, all the info is there. There's about 5 of us that sort of make it work. So
that's great. I really love that. And I'm all for, providing more education, as it were, to musicians. There's so many oversights, at least from my perspective, in the traditional education and schooling system. It sort of applies to the generalities of life, but not the specifics of life so often, if you want to pursue a career in arts or music and stuff like that, right? So
for sure. And we have, we'll have agents come out, we have promoters come out, we have radio people come out, we have, vocal coaches, and so just all different things. And so it's not necessarily all focused on songwriting, but more of like, if you're a songwriter and if you want a demo, or if you're a songwriter and you want to go perform. So it's, I think it's really cool because we have some people that don't, they're just lyricists, and we have other people that are, performing all the time and they're on radio. And so some people have had lots of success, and some people are just starting out. So it's a really broad spectrum of music and skill level. So it's such a joyful event, and I encourage anybody that wants to get into it or is into the songwriting thing to come out and check it out.
Super cool. Well, thanks so much for your time and generosity, Troy. Is there anything else I should have asked?
No, I think it's just really great what you're doing, and I applaud you for injecting your energy into the Calgary scene. So, Juan, thank you for that. Hats off to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Music in this episode was brought to you by Brian Young. Wherever you're listening to this right now, please consider leaving a 5-star review and comment to help us get the word out about the podcast.